Hi everybody, welcome to Supper Club, first one of the fall for 2014.
Yay.
Yeah, and some of you, this will be your first time together as a group. Some of you have been together for 3, 4, 5 years. So especially if you're a new group, we want to invite you to take your time just kind of getting to know each other, especially this first time. And I think today's topic actually works really well.
Yes, yes.
We're going to look at our theme of Love Thy Neighbor, which you probably know we're doing for this fall. Next month we'll bring in the book Tattoos on the Heart. That'll be a real resource for us as we do these videos. But today we thought we'd just start with kind of a general sense of how neighborhoods have changed and get you thinking about how your neighborhood changed maybe from the time you were a kid. Yeah.
Since they've been studying, sociologists, since the 1950s of the dramatical disappearance and disintegration of neighborhood and the ways in which people relate to each other. Used to, people would go next door and actually borrow a cup of sugar or engage or have barbecues together, and that has changed radically. There's many theories of what's happened and many different impacts. One of which I always appreciate is called the garage door opener impact. That by creating that invention, that we are in our cars, we push a button, we go inside our garage, we push the button, the garage door closes, and then we go in our house. We've lost any moment of interaction, even with the people who live right next door to us.
Yeah.
And that's had
From
an
the car
impact.
into the garage door shuts.
Yeah.
No chance. Yeah, yeah. Which relates to this whole suburbanization that's really had a huge impact on how we live, where we shop. You know, we don't go down to the downtown JCPenney store, and people of different socioeconomic levels are still mixing it up in the downtown area. We're going to specific areas. Children, they talk about how in suburbs that often it just feels kind of deserted because everyone's either off at a play date or they're in a soccer team that's already scheduled. So if you want to have a kiddo, just send them out and say go play. Yeah. There's nobody to play with anymore. Yeah. And so it almost forces you into that model, which has its great benefits, but it also is keeping us from interacting. And cars, being suburbanization created the need for to get in that car from that garage, drive to a certain place, get out. It feels much more. We've got a lot of choice about where we're going, and we're choosing into very specific little places where there's not a lot of cross-fertilization happening.
Yeah. And the internet has played a role in this. In some ways, we're more connected to our world than we ever could be, and yet sometimes the internet, it can enhance our connections. Yeah. It can also, if we use it as a replacement, it can remove us from feeling that connection, that one-on-one with someone else in a relationship. That's right. Which is very unique and different. Yeah.
And it tends to connect us with people who have some kind of shared interest too, right? So even politically, we tend to align ourselves with the politics of our folks and almost end up demonizing the other side because we don't even listen. We're spending time in these little enclaves that aren't interacting.
And I think that shows up even in television and news.
Yeah.
You think about the years that there were only 3 choices of what to watch.
We're all kind of watching the same thing.
We're watching the same thing and then engaging in dialogue about those same things, whether it was we agreed or disagreed about them. Right. There's so many choices now. We choose what we listen to and how it impacts us. Yeah. I know with television too, there's a whole impact of it loses the capacity for emotion. We don't feel, we see things happening and we get desensitized.
It's distance.
There's a distance from it. I know when I love watching baseball, but it's so different from watching on TV and actually being at a game. When we see something happening, even in the world or in our neighborhoods, unless we have a relationship with that person, it feels like it's surreal. It's just more news about something that happened in Denver, and we're in Park Hill, and we have no connection to know how did that impact them. And
the sociologists would say since we're spending less time in those neighborhoods, what Mark Dunkelman calls the middle ring of relationships. So our intimate relationships are fairly intact, close friends, family. Outer relationships, the internet's been fantastic to connect us, in that outer ring of people we don't really know very well, but share something in common. But that day-to-day, going down to the corner grocery store, getting your milk, interacting with the plumber and the doctor and all the folks from different walks of life, that's disappearing. And what Dunkelman points out is that was the ring of relationships where we were most likely to interact with people who were different from us. And we're losing that.
Yeah.
Right? So the inner ring is, those people who are close to us, outer ring, we share something in common. And think about, and I know certainly in my experience, that my childhood, how that's changed from growing up in a fairly small town, about 35,000 in Kentucky, where, you know, my mom just sent us out and, you know, I had rain of, you know, about a 7-block radius, right? There was just anywhere we could go. And plus, what's interesting, I was hanging out with kids, you know, there was, you know, all walks of life and all parenting styles, and my parents certainly didn't know all the parents like I know all the parents of the kids my kids hang out with. And while that, you know, there's some good things in how things have changed, I also think there was a kind of a life experience, a richness that I encountered by those differences that maybe my kids were trying to find ways as parents to introduce them to kids who are different from them.
Yeah.
I have to work at it.
Yeah.
You know, so.
I know for me, I grew up in a smaller town. In
Yeah.
fact, it was like 7,500 people.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so everybody knew everybody. And the fact that my mom was a teacher, my dad was on the school board and a businessman, you know, they would send us out as far as our bikes could take us.
Mm-hmm.
We were like a tribal kid group that just would go around. But there was a piece of the tribe that even if parents all watched out for each other's kids, so even if we were in a place that maybe we shouldn't be, somebody else was offering us input on maybe we needed to make a different choice in what we were doing. So it has an impact of how we were raised, but also our experience of neighborhood and how that's radically changed.
That's
Yeah.
right. So we thought for this supper club, but you know, we don't have to answer all these questions. We'll explore some of these over the months ahead. But for this month, maybe just talk about your own childhood. Share stories of how that's changed. If you've raised kids, how that was different from your own childhood. You know, just kind of share that piece of it.
And another question would be, are you longing for some of that difference, some of the diversities?
Yeah.
I know my very first call, I had a church that was Cambodian, African, and Scottish Presbyterian. I loved that diversity. And I moved from there, and my next call went to Wichita, Kansas, and it was a predominantly white community. In fact, where I lived was predominantly white. I missed that diversity. So I started becoming creative, and how can I experience that in a town where everything had gotten somewhat segregated, even by choice. It wasn't by laws anymore. And I found myself going as easy as to go to the grocery store across town just so that I could experience some of that diversity.
That's great.
But I think we all can be creative, and how do we engage ourselves with that experiences of difference that we may not get in our immediate circle.
One of the really key themes that we can work on this year as we think about loving our neighbor is how do we be creative about making these things possible, where that cross-fertilization happens. It's really rich.
Yeah.
All right, well, have fun.
Enjoy.
Have a great time, and we'll see you in a month.